Hi everyone. So I've just tested this. The volume should be okay, and that's the first thing I want to address. Just get the subject out of the way before getting into the main video. Um, the last video obviously there's no sound, and Declan, you brought my attention to that, Declan Marsh. So thank you to him for bringing my attention to that. That's something that sometimes happens in my channel, and honestly, I don't know why, because there's no trajectory to show that it's going to happen. So it's not like I've got one video where the sound's kind of bad, and then okay, it just goes out in the next one. It's honestly there's no way to know. I consider myself reasonably technically illiterate, but I don't know what's causing that. I free up space on my laptop. The volume is at full. Um, so unfortunately, sometimes the only way I know is for subscribers to mention it to me. So I apologize for that. But I'm going to upload that video now because it is an important subject, and it's about this latest scandal at Downing Street. The party, of course, I'm referring to. At least the party that's being spoken about, it may well be that there's been other events happening there. Um, Let me just say from the outset, my gut feeling is Johnson should go. And the reason I say this is not because it's one issue. I think this is just culminating from a whole series of issues, and it gets to the heart of a perception of double standards. I think that's the thing that's most galling. That at any other time, the Prime Minister holding a party as residence would be insignificant. It would be just expected, hosting diplomats or maybe cabinet members, that sort of thing. It really wouldn't be newsworthy. But when we're in a deadly pandemic, in which not only has there been a huge cost in human life, but there has been enormous, sometimes very painful sacrifices. I mean, those heartbreaking images of people not being able to say goodbye to their loved ones directly. Um, I really think that the when you factor in that in context, it starts to become unforgivable for those in power to be exhibiting double standards when they were the ones legislating the rules. Um, and this is not the first time it's happened with the Johnson government. We all know the Dominic Cummings scandal, then the Matt Hancock scandal. There's a long line of people close to Boris Johnson who have just displayed double standards in terms of how the rules are implemented. And Johnson can say that he honestly felt this was a work party. I don't really buy that. I think Johnson generally has a reputation for not being the most trustworthy character. Um, but I think this time it's just people are tired of having a prime minister who is known as a showman, he's known as a charismatic character, but I do think the party is now over for Boris, and I think that if it was just left sort of sniping at him, that would be politics. But I think there is a significant number now of Tory backbenchers who are unhappy with Johnson. And I want to be clear about something. I'm not someone who thinks that a prime minister should go every time there's a controversy. Because if that was the case, you'd never get anything done and you wouldn't have stable government. I mean, I look at great nations like Japan and Italy, and they seem to change the prime minister every year. I wouldn't want a situation in the UK where we go on this rotation of prime ministers, because I think it is not a good perception of stability abroad, and especially at this time when you have a resurgent Russia, a very assertive China. Apparently, there's just been a report. I haven't looked at the details, but apparently, a Chinese intelligence officer had actually snaked her way into Westminster, and she was gathering intelligence. I mean, this is major security breach. I don't know how significant that's going to be, but this is a time when we do need strong leadership. So for that reason, I don't say it lightly. I don't say, oh well, Johnson should just go like that. I don't say it lightly. I actually think when you have the Prime Minister in a weakened position, when he doesn't have full support of his colleagues, apparently at cabinet level there's some division going on. Rishi Sunak has distanced himself. Priti Patel apparently is backing the Prime Minister. So it's kind of this musical chairs of loyalties. So whether that's people just playing politics, like banking on Boris Johnson surviving this, and okay, well we've been loyal to him, or whether it's on the other side, them thinking we can't be, too close to the sinking captain. I mean, it's a very cynical way to look at it, but that is politics. Um, I just think that I mean, this apology in Parliament, it was sort of a half apology. Johnson expressed that people would be furious. He expressed that the perception is bad of double standards. I'm pleased he did vocalize that. However, he never directly apologized for his role. He said that the party happened. He questioned whether you know he thought it was a work party. I think it looked like excuses, kind of coupled with an apology. Starmer was not holding anything back. Of course, Starmer went straight in um, to the jugular, so to speak. And that's, some people would say, oh, Labour's just taking advantage of this. I don't really agree. I think that the job of an opposition party, and particularly an opposition leader, is to hold the government to account. In that sense, Keir Starmer's only doing his job. I mean, if Starmer was going easy and said, okay, well, thank you to the Prime Minister for the apology and, let's move on, then he would rightly be condemned as not holding the government to account. So anyone on the right who says that Labour's just taking advantage of this, I disagree because the job of opposition is to do precisely, um, well, to hold the government to account, and that's what it's doing. This does not mean that Keir Starmer is going to become prime minister. Tories won the general election. We're not a presidential system, so we don't vote for the prime minister. We vote for the party. So probably the right thing to do would be for the Tories to have an internal contest, um, and hopefully it will be as clean as possible. I just don't see how long Johnson can survive in this circumstance. If it was one thing, okay, that happens in politics. There isn't a single prime minister who goes through the entire tenure without some sort of controversy. But I think this time it's went too far. I think there just many Tories who are fed up with Boris Johnson, getting into these situations. And I think that was very palpable in the Dominic Cummings scandal. There were a lot of Tories angry that Johnson was so loyal to Cummings, despite the very obvious double standards going on there. Um, I mean, over and over and over again, we heard you need to follow these rules, stay at home, save lives. So for those in power to be breaking the rules, it's just I think it's unforgivable. I think it is absolutely an abuse of power. I mean, Johnson could argue it was interpreted certain ways, but what if, let's say, Mrs. Smith or Mr. Jones or Mrs. Singh, they interpreted the law in a certain way, and they said, "Oh well, officer, this is a work gathering. It's not really a funeral for my late husband." Um, I don't think the public would be let off so easily. So why should the Prime Minister? There's actually also a legal issue in this. Even inside the moral issues, there's actually a legal issue. Now, apparently the Met aren't going to follow it up. Whether that's because there isn't enough evidence, whether it's because they feel there's bigger priorities, I don't know. And in the grand scheme of thing, you might argue there are bigger priorities. There's knife thugs on the streets. But again, it gets into the perception of one rule for them and another rule for everyone else. As Starmer has pointed to, if there is legal questions here, Johnson has to go. Alistair Campbell was speaking about the issue. Now, Campbell himself is probably not the most trustworthy of people, but he did raise a valid point, which was that he'd been in the inner workings of Downing Street for a decade, and it is just unfeasible. It's unbelievable that a prime minister couldn't know what's going on in that circumstance. I mean, Downing Street is not a very big building. It's Georgian townhouse. It's compared to other residences of power around the world, it's relatively small. In other words, it's not like some big palace where the prime minister's quarters are in one section and something's going on somewhere else. I mean, you could see it if you're in the. I believe the office is on the first floor. If you are looking out onto the, I can't remember the exact layout of Downing Street, but it's just not feasible that the prime minister couldn't have known what was going on. I mean, at best, even if he didn't, that would just show incompetence. So basically, whatever way this is framed, Johnson doesn't come out well. Um, and I just think when you look at the long list of times that this man has created major trust issues, when you look at the number of scandals that have gone on in this government, sleaze, I think that comes down to Boris Johnson. I think he has to go. I mean, for his sake, as much as anything, it wouldn't be very comfortable to be a prime minister and not be able to garner that sort of support. So, for his own sake, if he doesn't want to be a lame duck prime minister, I think maybe he should resign. Now, he's not going to do that. So, unfortunately, it's probably going to get ugly. It's probably going to be a vote of no confidence. As I understand it, the only way that can happen is 54 MPs write to the 1922 committee. Um, I imagine right now there's frantic manoeuvrings going on in Tory backbenches. I imagine the chief whip will be writing to people. I imagine that Johnson will be trying to shore up support, but it'll probably be on condition. And I think at this point, backbenchers will have the power to say, Prime Minister, if we're going to support you, it has to be on X, Y, and Z conditions. Um, I think that's what's going to happen. And if Johnson can't get that support, then I think we're going to see a leadership contest. Hopefully, it will be smooth, not because I have much time for the Tories as a party, but because I am thinking about international image. I mean, the Chinese will be looking at this and laughing. And let's not forget, they still haven't addressed the origins of this. We should never forget when anything to do with COVID is looked at where this began. So it would be really perverse if we had, the sort of political situation, and we were perceived as weak at a time when we're facing this deadly pandemic, and then Beijing's laughing at us. We'll need strong leadership. Who can do that well? Liz Truss at the moment seems to be leading the polls of most viable next Tory leader. I think she's a little bit untested. She's still not very famous in the public. She's not as well known, for example, as Priti Patel. Patel's popularity has been dented by her handling of the migrant issue. The policing bill, not so much, because despite what the left think, I think a lot of people are fed up of anarchists blocking the road. This idea that that bill was going to stop freedom to protest, I think, was a false argument. But anyway, um, I like the fact Liz Truss is tough with Russia and China. I like the fact she's a hawk. Again, this is an area I personally have with Boris Johnson. I think he flip flops. He's tough on China one day, and then he's saying he's a Sinophile the next. And that would be fine, if he's saying he's for the country but has issues with the government. But I think Boris Johnson is not outspoken enough on areas he has to be outspoken. It's not that Starmer's much better. I mean, I think they're both kind of in different ways. I think Starmer is in tow with the woke left of his party, and I think Johnson is just a showman. I don't think Johnson has much principles on anything. Um, with a few issues perhaps, but I really don't know how much Boris Johnson really believes in. That's the thing. And I think it's time we had a prime minister with some high principles. And I know there's real politics. Sometimes, you have to negotiate in politics. But on an issue like China, I really don't know where Johnson lies. I don't know if he's a hawk. I don't know if he's soft, because he's demonstrated both. On one hand, his government's probably done more than any other to stand up to China. On the other hand, he personally has expressed hesitancy, for example, on the Huawei issue. That's not good enough. We need a prime minister who knows where they lie with this. I think Liz Truss would be tougher in that sense, and that's good. I think we need to be tough with China right now. I don't think we should. I don't think we should take their insults. I don't think we should pander to their sensitivity. An example being apparently the Chinese embassy has been whining about its security in London at this new fancy embassy on the grounds that it's on the site of the old Royal Mint, on the grounds that there's protesters who might dislike their presence there. Well, I would say, as an embassy, of course, it should have protection, but the Chinese have to accept the fact we're a free country, and there will be, some people who don't like their policies. A lot of people. Apparently, the local borough there is planning to, or has proposed changing street names to Tiananmen Square and so on. I think that's a good move. I think, the Chinese need to be made uncomfortable, not unsafe. You know, diplomats should have their safety, but they should be made uncomfortable. They cannot be normalized in the eyes of the world. And what we sure as hell shouldn't be doing is pandering to their sensitivities and to their demands. If a small country like Lithuania can stand up to China, we have no excuse, really. We're a great nation. Uh, I just don't see any reason for weakness in the face of a hostile foreign adversary, which China is. Um, and I think that, again, getting back to Boris Johnson, I just think he has flip flopped on this issue. I don't know where he lies. I want a prime minister who makes it very clear what he or she believes in when it comes to standing up to the likes of China and Russia. I want them to be very assertive, very clear, and very pronounced on that. I'm not talking about, giving away the inner workings of intelligence, but just to know where they lie. Also to put Beijing on notice. Now, maybe in Johnson land, this flip flopping is actually a good thing because it confuses our opponents. I don't know if that's his way of thinking. I just think it's because he lacks principle. Um, and that's not good. So, even without this Downing Street party scandal, I have long felt that Johnson, the showmanship is going to end at some point, and I think people are tired of it. I think that, um, yeah, I think he has to go. And, I don't say that lightly. If he did go, incidentally, just as a matter of record, he would be the shortest serving Prime Minister since Alec Douglas Home in the early 60s, who was in office for just over a year. If Johnson does go now, that would be a shorter tenure than Gordon Brown, Theresa May, and James Callaghan, who all served about 3 years. Um, and it's sort of, it's definitely not what probably would have been expected of Boris Johnson. I mean, he was genuinely quite a popular figure. And his honeymoon lasted longer than other prime ministers. But I just think at this point, what's left? You have a showman, and people just no longer buy Boris Johnson as a serious man, a serious leader for the country. His premiership won't be written off as a total disaster. He did deliver Brexit. I also wouldn't judge him too harshly on COVID because I honestly think anyone who was in power would have had to deal with that. And people could say that the country should have locked down earlier and so on. Um, I don't think it's fair to say, well, look, we are sixth or seventh highest death toll in the world because I don't think the likes of China are honest about the true COVID death toll. So this is an exceptional situation. So I wouldn't judge Johnson too harshly on that. We've also had quite a successful vaccine rollout. So I don't think his premiership's been a total disaster, but I think if he clings on and clings on as a lame duck prime minister, it is going to affect his legacy. In fact, ironically, if he went now, his premiership would probably be judged as mediocre. I think the scandals will be remembered, but so will some of the strengths. He delivered Brexit. But if he clings on, I think he will be a lame duck prime minister. Anyway, that's where I lie. Let me know your thoughts. Should Boris Johnson go? If yes, why? If no, why? I'm open-minded to both arguments. I mean, I take no pleasure from saying the prime minister should go because I don't think, like I say, we should have this rotation of prime ministers. But I think with this particular prime minister, it is just too little credibility anymore. And I don't think that's good for government. I don't think it's good for the country. Let me know your thoughts.